what's your best spinoff investment that you've done?
Yeah, so my best spinoff is, it's always fun to talk about the winner. So there's a company, and this is a micro cap. So the stock is called Liberated Syndication. And the backstory is that this is why it became a micro stock. Basically, Liberated Syndication was a division. Liberated Syndication is focused on podcast hosting. So if you want to start a podcast, what the market leader in terms of hosting podcasts is Liberated Syndication. They have a great service, great reviews, and they're like the market leader. Now, that business was a division, but it was buried within a company called Fab Universal. And Fab Universal's business, the company or the CEO of Fab Universal basically bought a Chinese media company that, as far as I could tell, licensed content from studios in the US and then sold, those like DVDs and other forms of media through kiosks in China. And I didn't invest in the business when that was the main focus of the business, but that business turned out to be a fraud. So the acquired business turned out to be literally a fraud, where the guy who is the CEO and chairman of that business is, I think, in jail right now in China. And so obviously the stock just got absolutely crushed, delisted from the NASDAQ, just completely abandoned. There were lawsuits. The management team, who's still intact at Liberated Syndication, was, selling stock in the open market. So there were some lawsuits about insider selling. There's a bunch of lawsuits, but they ended up all getting settled. And, about a year or two later, the dust settles, and the only thing that's standing, the Fab Universal stock still exists. It's trading at like 20 cents. And but its business, that was the Chinese media business, is gone. But all of it is no liabilities, no debt or no other liabilities on the balance sheet. And all that's left is Liberated Syndication, this podcast hosting company. And so what they did to try to separate Liberated Syndication from the overhang of Fab Universal is they did like a 1-for-1 stock spinoff, where they said, if you own one share of Fab Universal, you'll get one share of Liberated Syndication. And so that spinoff happened. And I looked at the Form 10, or I think it might have been an S1. It was trading over the counter, so I forget exactly what it was, but looked through the financials, and this business, as you can imagine, like if you've been paying attention to the podcast world, or like you're interested in listening to the podcasts, it's a business that's in secular growth. I'm a big podcast fan, so like I was like, oh yeah, this completely makes sense. The business and the stock was trading at literally like 1x earnings. And the growth, the company was growing 25%, 40% EBITDA margins, recurring revenue, secular growth, not really dependent on the economy. And so like, if it wasn't a fraud, then it was a home run. And so I did a ton of work on it, like, talked to management, did a ton of work on it. Didn't know for sure, but was pretty convinced that it wasn't a fraud. And so, I invested, it doubled. It went to like 40 cents. And I think I got in around 40 or 42 cents. And the other thing that I looked for was that management didn't own any stock. So Greenblatt's, big thing is look at the incentives. But what I thought, they weren't promoting the stock at all. And so I figured what they were going to do is they're going to give themselves a big, juicy option package and then promote the stock. And that's basically exactly what they did. So the stock, did really, really well. I wrote it up to about $1.50. And then they made an acquisition, a diversification acquisition. They bought basically an internet hosting company that was in Pittsburgh as well. So they thought that there would be synergies between their podcast business, hosting business, and this internet hosting business, where they could cross-sell to each other's customers. After that acquisition, the company was trading at like 7x EBITDA, or just under 7x. And I was like, the risk reward doesn't look good. You have a management team who, regardless of your opinion of them, doesn't look like this was the best acquisition. They gave themselves a bunch of stock. They acquired a company that ended up being a fraud. So like I went to the sidelines, and the stock was roughly flat for a year or two, about a year. And more recently, an activist investor has gotten involved with the stock, and the stock has continued to run. So it's up to about 250 last time I checked. The other big thing is that the stock's going to uplist eventually to the NASDAQ. So, I mean, this was just kind of like, a home run. It was just like a stock trading like 1 or 2 times earnings, a business in secular growth, defensive, recurring revenue, high returns on equity, high margins, everything that you could hope for. I mean, the issue was the management team, and that's why it was trading over the counter, and that's why it was so cheap. But that's those obviously don't come around too often, but that's my best one so far.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I still am pretty young in this area. If you read my book, you saw that I had issues with the Hewlett Packard, and I just dropped into that. I was like, wow, this works.
Yeah.
I woke up three years later and I couldn't believe that I'd made any money on this. So,
yeah.